This is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at two collaborative albums from two of the most important and iconic musicians in the history of British jazz, and two outstanding players who, quite frankly, in my opinion, need no introduction whatsoever. I am talking about, of course, one and only Allan Holdsworth and Gordon Beck. So the Holdsworth and Beck collaboration goes all the way back to the 70s, where they played and collaborated with each other in a number of different settings and various projects. Holdsworth and Beck played together on an album called Conversation Piece, and Allan Holdsworth played on a Gordon Beck album called Sunbird. And this led to two collaborative duo albums that came out in the early to late 80s. And Gordon Beck played and was featured on an Allan Holdsworth album called None Too Soon. So Holdsworth and Beck have a long history and have made a lot of music together. Now, Allan Holdsworth, as we all know, one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived, and considered by many to be one of the finest to ever come out of Britain. And he has seen it all, done it all, and played and collaborated with a number of different bands and artists in all genres, from Tempest to Soft Machine to Tony Williams' Lifetime Band to UK to Jean Luc Ponty to Bruford to Planet X to Derek Sherinian, to name a few. And of course, Gordon Beck, considered by many to be one of the greatest and most respected pianists to ever come out of Britain, and played with some of the finest musicians to ever come out of Britain during the 60s to the 70s. So Holdsworth and Beck have a lot of history and have very big credentials. So, for today's edition, I am going to be discussing the Holdsworth and Beck collaborative albums, which is a total of two studio albums. And as always, I am going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. Now, these two albums really give you an opportunity in seeing a different side to Allan Holdsworth's guitar playing. Now, we all know he can rip and shred with the best of them, but with these two albums in particular, you don't really get that. You get a much more laid back and a more melodic style from Holdsworth's guitar playing. Obviously, when you hear him, you still know it's him, but it's very different. It's a lot more jazzier. It doesn't have that burning intensity that we all know. And you get to hear Allan Holdsworth play a lot of acoustic guitar. You get to hear Holdsworth play more traditional jazz guitar. And he even throws in the occasional violin playing. And he even sings on one of these albums. So you really get to hear different sides to Holdsworth's musical personality. And the rapport and the musicianship between Holdsworth and Beck, as you'd expect, is world class. And these two work very well together. Now, Holdsworth, of course, would later go on to play with lots of keyboard players, but to actually hear Holdsworth in this setting playing with a jazz pianist is a rarity in itself, in my opinion. And Holdsworth, just like every setting you put him in, he excels and thrives and just shows his diversity and his versatility in his playing and composing as well. So we're going to start with the first album, and this one came out in 1980, and this one is called The Things You See. So this is the first Allan Holdsworth and Gordon Beck album, and it's a very laid back album with lots of traditional jazz guitar playing and of course traditional jazz piano playing. And Allan Holdsworth plays electric and acoustic guitars. He plays electric violin, and he even delivers the occasional vocals as well. And Gordon Beck, of course, is on piano. A tremendous album, a very laid back album. So if you're expecting to hear lots of that burning intensity and that shredding style that we all know Holter for, you're not necessarily going to find it here. This is a very different side to Allan Holdsworth's guitar playing, but at the same time, very pleasant. It's very breezy, it's very airy, some of it is very atmospheric, and very enjoyable listening. You know, if you ever was curious about, well, what does Holdsworth sound like in a unplugged setting with just two guys? You've come to the right place because you're in for something really special with this album. And as I said, it's a different side to Holdsworth, and you get to hear him in a rare setting which you probably wouldn't normally find him performing in. So we got 7 tracks here. So most of the tracks are written and composed by Allan Holdsworth, and we've got 3 contributions from Gordon Beck. So we got the first track, Golden Lakes, which is a lovely opener. Stop Fiddling is another great track as well. The Things You See, which is the title track, which is also known as When You Haven't Got Your Gun, is a great track as well. Diminished Responsibility is great. And then we've got She's Looking, I'm Cooking, which is like 11 minutes long. It's like the longest track of the entire album. And then we got At the Edge, which is great. And then we got Up Country. Very enjoyable album. Not an easy one to find, but if you can find it, I highly recommend it. This is a must have for all Holdsworth fans. If you're looking to hear something different from Allan Holdsworth, this is definitely one well worth checking out if you can find it. So the standout tracks for me are Diminished Responsibility, She's Looking, I'm Cooking, Golden Lakes, and At the Edge and Up Country. But the entire album, top to bottom, is excellent. It's a very laid back album. So, you know, if you're expecting to hear what you think you're going to hear, you're probably not going to find it here. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there is some lovely music, very pleasing, and Holdsworth in easy listening mode, if you will. But it's a remarkable album, and as I said, I'd highly recommend it to anyone. So there you have it. All the Things You See, a tremendous album, not an easy one to find, but definitely worth checking out. So there you have it. All the Things You See, a lovely album, in my opinion. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1988, and this one is called With a Heart in My Song. So this is a very different album to The Things You See, and this features Allan Holdsworth on a lot of synth. So by this point, Allan Holdsworth was dabbling into guitar synth and was playing a lot of synth. And this album at times sounds like Sand, which was the album that came out the previous year. It's a very airy, atmospheric album, and you could kind of call this album Sand Part 2. So Holdsworth playing a lot of synth. He really makes the whole album feel like a full band. And Gordon Beck, although traditionally known as a pianist, he's playing a lot of keyboards as well. And there is some piano as well. But it's a really good album. It's a lot more experimental than The Things You See. The Things You See was a much more traditional, almost an acoustic project. But with this one, it's a lot more heavily fusion, a bit more electronic driven, and as I said, it's a lot more experimental, and some of it is very heavily improvised as well, but still a very enjoyable album. So we've got Equus, which was written and composed by Gordon Beck, 54 Duncan Terrace by Allan Holdsworth, Ain't No Grief on the Southwest Chief by Gordon Beck, and we've got the title track with A Heart in My Song by Gordon Beck, and then we got 2 solo pieces, 999 by Gordon Beck, and Sundays by Allan Holdsworth. And then we got So So Calypso. So most of the tracks are written and composed by Gordon Beck, and two contributions by Allan Holdsworth. But very enjoyable album. And as I said, it's a little bit different to the things you see. And I think that's what makes these two albums very unique because they don't sound quite the same. So it's not a case of this is a follow up to the previous album. It's a completely different album in itself. So the standout tracks for me are 54 Duncan Terrace, With a Heart in My Song, Sundays, and 999. But the whole album itself, from start to finish, is very enjoyable, and it sounds more like an Allan Holdsworth album, which is no surprise because Holdsworth does have a huge presence on this album. But it's definitely worth checking out. If you're more into Holdsworth's synthwax playing, and if you enjoyed Sand, I think you might be very satisfied with this one because this definitely feels more like a sequel to Sand, and it's very enjoyable. Some really good music on here. So there you have it. With a heart in my song, very enjoyable album. As I said, very different to the things you see, but still definitely worth checking out if you're a Holdsworth fan. So there you have it. With a heart in my song, great album. So, which Allan Holdsworth and Gordon Beck album do I think is the best one? Well, there's only two albums, and they're both great. They're both different from each other, but really and truly, you can't go wrong with either of them. If you're a Holdsworth fan, I would say check them both out. But for me, if I had to choose which one I think is the best one, I would go with The Things You See. I think The Things You See is a rare treat to hear Allan Holdsworth playing violin, a lot of acoustic guitar as well, which is something that he didn't really do a whole lot. There are a few albums where he is featured on acoustic guitar, but to actually hear more of him playing acoustic guitar, for me, makes this album a little bit higher than With a Heart in My Song. Not taking anything away from that album, it's still very good, but it's a lot more electronic and a lot more experimental, but still got lots of great material. But for me, The Things You See, it's just such a breath of fresh air to hear Allan Holdsworth playing in a duo setting, just guitar and piano. The very fact that this was the only two albums he ever did in this sort of environment puts these two up on a different level to all of his other projects that he has done in his long and legendary career. So there you have it. Allan Holdsworth and Gordon Beck, The Things You See, the one I consider to be the best out of the two. I think it's a lovely album, very laid back, doesn't quite have that burning intensity that we know Holdsworth for, but still very pleasing to the ear and a great listening experience, in my opinion. So there you have it. The Things You See, absolutely beautiful album, in my opinion. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Allan Holdsworth and Gordon Beck album? Is it The Things You See or With a Heart in My Song? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.